This is the Nook Podcast, and I'm Stephen Murphy.
Can you imagine if Joel Osteen was your pharmacist? Well, here's your prescription, Mr. Wiley. And don't worry about all these negative side effects. We just like to focus on the positive.
And that is stand-up comedian Ed Wiley.
Do you have your CVS card? Hold it up and say it like you mean it. This is my CVS card. I will get the discounts that I can. Today, I will get a receipt that could wallpaper my entire bathroom.
Prior to this interview, I only knew Ed through his clever social media feeds. I reached out just to see if he would be interested in a discussion about his very interesting life. By day, he's a software guy. Simple enough. But at home, he's a husband, father of 6 kids, and, wait for it, a goat farmer. Obviously, a fascinating mix of things. So maybe a side gig as a stand-up comedian makes perfect sense. Settle in for an intriguing conversation with my new friend, Ed Wiley. I love that you have got such a mixed bag. I mean, like, what do you, if somebody asked one of your kids, what does your dad do for a living? What would they say?
They'd say he sits at his computer. I feel like I'm that middle-aged uncle who, like, did a bunch of stuff. Like, what's he doing now? I don't know what he's doing now. What's Ed up to out there? He has goats. He's on a farm. I don't know. God help him. He went to college. He went to Georgia Tech. He just totally forgot about that degree, I guess. So no, I mean, they know, because my kids are 8. They range of 6 kids. They range ages 8 to actually 19.
Wow.
So they the older kids, they get what I do. They don't know any of the details, but I work in the software business, kind of doing software architecture by day. If you're not like super famous in comedy, you gotta have a job.
Right.
And I'm just fortunate to have started later in life, because I know a lot of guys who are super funny, guys and girls who are super funny, and they have been doing comedy like that's the first thing they ever did, right? And they don't have they didn't have any other jobs, so they're just, this year's been really hard for them.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, because the entertainment sector's just been hammered.
But I just love how often you work goat farming into a tweet. It's just like, you just don't meet a lot of goat farmers, and so that as kind of a mainstay for you is hilarious.
I'm really going for as unrelatable of content as possible. That's what my goal is.
Well, for whatever this vote is worth, you're nailing it.
Oh, thank you, man. At least I've got one fan out there who's into the goat joke.
Well, okay, you mentioned what the sector has been like for the last year or so. What does that even look like? I mean, yes, you've mentioned that you've got the day gig, but has comedy all but ceased for you?
Yeah, I mean, I had during I guess what I call if you look at the COVID numbers, you had like the first spike and then the summer spike, and then there was a lull after the summer spike. I did slip a show in there. Had a show in October with a couple of my buddies that was fine. It was great, socially distanced. They had the crowd like 30 feet from the, stage, which was kind of funny. But it was a fun show. You could tell everybody was relieved to be there. I was grateful that there were no issues with the show. Nobody got sick after coming to the show or anything like that. But so this year has been, I mean, musicians and comedians alike. It has been a wasteland, and all of the supporting industries too behind that. Audio, video. I mean, it's just been brutal.
Yeah, I've had so many friends, especially the freelance folks that I used to work with back in Phoenix, who it's just been next to nothing. And even as sports started coming back and trying to make something of a season, there's still, I had guys going without work for months. I can only wonder how long that will, what kind of a mark that will leave long term.
Yeah, there's a lot of there are whole sectors of the economy that are just hammered like that. A lot of folks have turned to Zoom shows. I've done a couple of digital shows like that. I don't really like them because comedy is it's a dynamic. There's a feel in the room.
Yeah.
There's a timing that the room, like a friend of mine is a comedian who's also a high school teacher. He said, you know, how every class has its own personality. Every comedy audience has its own personality. And you get a beat on that pretty quick. And
sure.
If you don't, they'll let you know you don't have a beat on it. They give comedy audience, you know, an audience gives you immediate feedback as to whether or not they're on track with you. So you adjust. So, I mean, my career's been very weird. I started late in life. I was right on the cusp of 40 years old when I started comedy. So I've not been in the game that long. I'm still a comedy baby. I just happen to have some really amazing opportunities early on to do some pretty cool things. I think 2017 was probably kind of my biggest year. I had a video called "If Trump Were a Youth Pastor" that went viral.
That was
hilarious. It was kind of wild, man, because that was when I realized like churches from all over the country were called. It was just ringing off the hook. And it was like, oh, now we have to figure this out. And, you know, you try to figure out what situations or things where, because a lot of times well-intentioned folks, they don't understand like where comedy fits and where it doesn't.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of comedy on Sunday morning.
Right.
I'm just not.
And a lot of people aren't.
Yeah. And churches will do that and they'll try to mix a message with it. I have jokes about goats and meth. And it's not that I feel bad about telling that joke on a Sunday morning. It's funny. It's benign. It's just that the Western Christian mind in general, when you sit in church, there's a sense of reverence, and you're just sending people. You're sending people on a real ride. So I learned very quickly. Some people do really well with those. I didn't want to take those. I enjoyed doing it in churches. I didn't even intend to do church comedy when I started out. I've always worked clean. I was a dad of 6 kids when I started. I've always worked clean. And the trajectory really out of my hands, I'm just going to say God opening and closing doors, how led me in that church realm. I just look back for times that I was at the most peace. And those times are when I just was doing the work, whatever that work was at the time.
Right.
And then trusting God with the results.
Okay. Well, you bring up an interesting point that I was very curious about coming into this. Differentiate for me, for my friends listening, the difference between a comic who's Christian and a Christian comic. Is that a fair question?
The Christian
or
comic is not funny. They're not funny. They're so
Why
bad.
is you just saying that just funny?
No, it's...
I mean, were you, when you said you started, the way you started, you were clean to start. So were
I started
you
in a club? Yeah, I was a Christian guy. I was like the old dad, you know, who was coming into the club, and like the first time in my life I was ever offered drugs was in a comedy club. And it's this kid, I was like 21 years old. He's like, he told me, dude, man, I'm gonna get high. Do you want to get high? I was like, no, dude, I am a father, and you are ruining your life. Because it was in the bathroom. I went to the bathroom after my set. There's kids in there, and I'm like, no. And he says, well, I saw your set. And I'm like, my set was so bad you had to come in here and do drugs. And he's like, no, you said you had 6 kids, so I figured if anybody needed to do drugs. Anyway, I said no, I'm not doing them. Anyway, that's a story about how my big family is working to solve drug abuse in this country. But my point is that
thank you on behalf of a very grateful nation.
Yes. We're working hard for you. Started in a club. It's Jerry Farber's Side Door. It's now the Punchline in Atlanta. And I would drive. I lived 3 hours from Atlanta. I would drive up there every Wednesday night, usually bomb, and then drive home. And I met all of these guys who were just grinding it out, trying to figure out the craft of comedy. It kind of reminded me of being back in college, where you're around a lot of people who don't think or believe or live like you. So I really enjoyed the camaraderie. It just, you know, a lot of cool conversations about life and faith and whatnot. So I really loved that. That kind of time. I didn't love all the bombing. That's brutal.
Yeah, I'm sure. You take your bruises.
Yeah, man. But I really loved being able to be around people who did not believe in Jesus, did not come from the background that I was from, and to have the opportunity to talk with them about faith and life just in well, like we're working on the same thing. Our hands are to the same plow.
Yeah.
We're going and dying in front of the same crowds.
Right.
You know? So it's you're kind of down in the trenches. That's the thing about comedy, particularly when you get started doing open mics and bars and these B-list comedy club shows. You develop a bond with those other comedians like you've been at war.
Right.
I mean, it's because somebody ain't gonna make it
Right.
in that set. It's either gonna be you or the audience. One, like you're gonna kill or you're gonna bomb. One of the
Right.
two. So
And somebody's going to have to help drag that guy off stage.
yes. So I guess I never really thought. Like you ask to differentiate between a comedian who's a Christian and a Christian comic. I mean, I would almost call it more like church comedy. There is a market.
Oh, okay.
Of church comedy. It's a big market. Probably the biggest names in that market over the past 10 years have been people like Tim Hawkins and John Crist.
Right. Michael Jr.
Michael Jr., absolutely.
Yep.
Anita Renfro. I would like to say that all the people working in that market are Christians, but I've met a lot of people in that market, and it's just like everywhere else. You meet amazing people who know and love Jesus, who don't ever work in churches, and then you meet amazing people who know and love Jesus, who do work as comedians in churches, and then you meet people who work as comedians in churches who probably don't know the Lord. I mean, only God knows, right?
Right.
Like only God knows. I think there are, and some of my friends, like they really see their comedy as like a ministry.
Right.
Like this is my ministry. I tell goat jokes, and I do non-political impressions of political figures. I don't even tell a lot of church jokes, really.
Right.
I'm kind of eclectic. I'm all over the place. I do enjoy making people laugh. I do believe that laughter, when it's not, when it doesn't have some kind of inappropriate or foul message underneath it, that good, clean laughter is good for you as a human being. But I don't try to over spiritualize what I do.
But now tell me this, because again, I was such a huge fan of the way that this interview started with that bit about Joel Osteen as your pharmacist.
It's all gone downhill since then. I've really taken the energy out of it. It's
the ability to kind of poke the bear a little bit. I don't know if irreverent is too strong a word, because I don't think it is, but I'm sure that there's somebody that would just scoff at you making a joke about Joel Osteen.
Oh my
but
gosh.
I have such an appreciation for that, because I guess I'd like to think that somebody who's never heard of Ed Wiley before sits down in a club and you do the bit about Joel Osteen. They can now you've made a connection that you might not have made with a goat joke.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Is it irreverent? Yeah, probably to some people. I mean, I don't know. I just don't have a lot of hate in my heart about these impressions I do.
Right.
I'm focused on tone and tenor, mannerisms. I'm a little older than, I'm middle-aged, so my influences growing up were like Dana Carvey.
Yep.
Right. So I come from that school of you just make fun of everybody.
Right.
So it's
with a little bit of good timing mixed in.
Yeah. And you're trying to find your comedic take on this person.
No, I'm absolutely with you there. I'm just also, I've never been in that school of thought that says that, there's a certain group of people that are just off limits. And I'm not saying that means you just line folks up and hurl rocks and garbage, but I'm just like, should we ever take ourselves so seriously that a comedian can't take a poke at a president or at a guy like Joel Osteen?
Yeah. I mean, I've done a Biden bit for like 2.5. I have a 2.5 minute Biden bit. I don't do a Biden impression. Just some of the things he said were so funny to me, because he's Biden is a historic embellisher. If you're Gen X, you remember, he's historically embellished things. He's not nearly the character that Trump is. So it's harder to get a comedic beat on him, because it's like Biden to me it feels like it's like you called your dad while he's watching L.A. Law, it's like it's or Law and Order or whatever. It's like and he just keeps talking to you while he's watching his TV show. That's how Biden always sounds to me when he talks. And I think there is a certain I think there is a good thing about ripping on people in authority, particularly from a Christian perspective. And the reason I think that is because we Christians have a tendency as a group to idolize people and put people up on platforms that are not in ways that aren't good.
I absolutely agree.
So if we can, I think the best leaders welcome satirization.
Yes.
They welcome comedic takes on them because it takes that, it takes some of the seriousness of kind of it brings them, it makes them more human. It reframes them as regular people. And
well, yeah, anything to level the playing field, to know that we're all in the same struggles.
Yeah, totally. And we're just like that power distance. I guess that's a psychology term. That's not a Christian thing.
No,
that shouldn't be a part of the narrative of a Christian story in their life. So I think satire and comedic takes, impressions, jokes, bits, whatever, about people, particularly people in large positions of influence, I think they're a net good when they're done from I'm just going to say it, particularly from a good-hearted perspective. I mean, you can just be cruel, and sometimes impressions are just bad.
Yes.
Like Alec Baldwin's impression of Trump is just not even good.
No.
Like, how did this? Like, I am dropping names of celebrities, like I'm somehow better than them. No, the point is that that's just like a mock.
Yes.
This is subjective, but there's a difference between just a flat out mock and a comedic take on a person. I think there's a stark contrast.
Right. And I think you will see that immediately in the audience response, because a mock kind of hits that echo chamber. It's only going to resonate with the people that are absolutely on board with the mock. Doesn't matter what side of any aisle you're sitting on, whereas a comic take is going to have a much broader appeal.
That's right. And that's hard.
Because people are, I'm not suggesting that there's some magic pill for that. But I think that you mentioned good heart. That's exactly what I was thinking as you said it, that I'd like to think that because your nature has just, at least for this guy, again, you always come across as just a very good-natured person. So you take a little poke at wouldn't it be hilarious if Joel Osteen was your pharmacist? You just brought in 90% of your people. There's always going to be that little section as, I cannot believe that you just did that. You just don't he's the pastor. You don't make fun of the pastor.
They comment on my posts frequently.
Oh, do they?
Yes.
Oh, the keyboard warriors of social media.
Yes. I try pretty hard, particularly when doing impressions of people who are political leaders, to not take a side in my act. Like, I don't want to do that. I'm not stumping. You make a really good point, Stephen, about how it's easy to kind of holler into that echo chamber. Mm-hmm. Whether it's a conservative or liberal, just take a hard turn and then just lean into the caricature of whichever one, and then you can holler into that echo chamber, and you'll get half the internet on your side immediately. It's more nuanced. When you're particularly when you're in a city and there's a comedy audience, because it's going to be a mix of people.
Well, and ultimately, I mean, is it, at the risk of sounding it too simplistic, what is your goal? Whether you've got a 15-minute set, a 30-minute set, whatever time that you're allotted on stage on whatever platform, what's your goal at the end of that time with that audience? Just
fame and world domination. That is what I'm really going.
We are so tracking right there.
Yes, we are on the same spiritual page.
I'm on. No. When you know the tens of fans that I will have listening to this, you'll understand.
I will bring 3 or 4 people to your page.
I appreciate
faithful followers. No, man. What is my goal in doing comedy? I'm gonna. So we talked about your goals of the podcast, and it's keeping it real and whatnot. Man, I have struggled with that. I love doing comedy. I started doing comedy because I believed it was a better fit for the way that I was naturally wired than anything I'd ever done. And God took me through a long series of health problems and various situations to remove a lot of fear I had that made it possible for me to even take a step and do it.
Oh, wow.
And that's all it was when I started. I didn't think I would ever get to do things like tour with Anita Renfro or have a national televised set on the Circle Network, which is the Grand Ole Opry's network that they launched this year. I did not think I've gotten to do comedy with people I was fans of before. Guys like Johnny W, super funny. Brian Bates, super funny. I was fans of those guys and saw them live before I was even doing comedy. I've gotten to do shows with them.
That's awesome.
I'm super grateful for that. I think my goal in a show is I want to leave people lighter than they were when they got there. I know for me, if something really gets me laughing, I mean, really gets me, it doesn't matter what's going on. It's not just a reprieve. I mean, it's like healing in a way, my mind and soul. And that's, and I don't want to over spiritualize it, but I do believe that tracks with a biblical understanding of, joy and loving your neighbor as yourself. I mean, I genuinely want people to leave lighter than they were when they got there. And I want us to kind of all experience that together. So that's my goal in a show. My overall strategy and career goal, I have no idea.
Right.
I don't want to compromise time with my children. I take my kids with me. One thing that whenever I can, I have a daughter who's a singer. I have a daughter who's a fiddle player. We have bits we do to close out the show.
Oh, nice.
We did that at the show in Tennessee back in October. Closed out my set with that. So taking a few of the kids with me who are interested in this kind of world has made all the difference. I made that decision in 2017. I was on the road after that Trump video went viral. I was going just to show after show after show. I remember doing a show near Chicago. I opened for Anita. I drove through the night to Kentucky. And when I finally got home from all of that run, I was like, I don't want to do this. I'm away from how did this happen? I had my hands up going, this is great, but how did this happen? I want to be with my family. So I made the decision. I was like, I'm going to take one or more of the kids with me. They wanted to do it anyway. So I'm not going to sacrifice my family at the altar of any career, whether it's technology or comedy.
Yeah,
like that's a
huge.
given. And I had enough of a taste of that moment that it's not healthy, dude.
Oh, no.
When you get millions of views on something like that, the attention you get is not healthy. And it's so fleeting too, because everybody who's had anything go viral or wants something to go viral, just calm down. There are videos on the internet of rubber chickens squeaking Africa by Toto that have tens of millions of views. Just because you went viral doesn't mean you're any good.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean you're good. It doesn't mean you're going to have a career.
No.
So you have to just do the work and trust God with the outcome. And I mean, that is really, you will not have peace otherwise. You will get in this grind, this I'll see you at the top grind, and it will eat you alive. And you will slowly see, and I've watched this happen to comedians who have had a rapid ascent just in the years I've been doing comedy. It'll eat you up. And then you find yourself doing this thing that you love, but the reasons you got into it, you can't even taste that, feel that, sense that anymore. And as a believer, if anybody ought to have joy in their work, it's a believer in Jesus.
I am so glad that Ed had some time. I hope you enjoyed that nearly as much as I did. A couple things stood out to me. The first one being, what a great reminder that a good, clean laugh is good for you. I had a good, clean laugh a few times there. It made me think about Proverbs 15:13. It says, a glad heart makes a cheerful face. Well, I hope that this leaves a cheerful face for you. And the second one, do the work and trust God for the outcome. That will preach. I think that applies no matter what you're doing, at work or at home, whatever it is. Do the work and trust God for the outcome. That's part of why I started this podcast in the first place. I left a link for Ed's Twitter account down in the show notes. I hope you guys give him a follow because it's just good for a good chuckle all the time. If this episode has been an encouragement to you, would you please share it with a friend? If you're not a part of our Facebook group yet, come on and join us. That's facebook.com/meetmeinthenook. Facebook.com/meetmeinthenook. If you're listening to this at Apple Podcasts, would you please take a minute and leave me a good review? It really does help get the word out. I just want to leave you with this blessing from Philippians 1:6. I am certain that God, who began the good work within you, will continue it until his work is finally finished on the day when Christ Jesus returns. Thanks for spending some time with me here in the Nook today, and I will see you next time. The Nook Podcast is a production of Sozo Digital Media.